You're listening to the Minor Detail Podcast, a place where all things community, encouragement, and lifestyle come together through meaningful conversation. I'm your host, Khaila Ariel, and I'm so grateful that you chose to join me on this journey of authenticity to serve as a link that amplifies human connection in our everyday lives. Navigating life on a daily basis can be difficult, but I am confident that together we'll be our own answer to life's minor little details that come our way. Sit back and enjoy today's episode, purposely curated just for you. Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of the Minor Detail Podcast. I'm your host, Khaila Ariel, and I am so grateful that you are tuning into today's episode. I am also so excited about the conversation we are about to have, okay? Y'all know I work in the marketing and advertising space, and rarely do I ever just get to sit down and really hash it out with fellow ad friends. So this is going to be good. Joining us today is Reonna Johnson. Reonna is the Vice President Director of Strategic Growth at Deutsch LA, co-founder of Three's a Crowd, a community of LA-based Black creative professionals, and host of Hex Code Black, a podcast featuring raw and honest conversations with Black professionals at the intersection of race, culture, and creativity. Let me just say this. If you don't know Reonna, like aunties used to say growing up, you better recognize, okay? Reonna, thank you for joining the show today.
Oh, thank you. And I love my intro. I feel so special.
You are special. You're very special. So before we dive in, I like to just kind of, level set with my people. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling really good. I'm jazzed about a lot of things that I have going on, and it's somewhat stressful, but it's a good stress. But I'm feeling really, really good.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that. I think that this time of year, you know what I mean? Like things are winding down, or they should be winding down. Sometime is the best time to get inspiration and kind of plan for what you want the future to look like, the coming year to look like. So I think I can relate, right?
Yes.
Just being excited about what's to come, having that last bit of energy in your battery pack before you truly wind down.
That's exactly how I feel. Exactly.
Well, good. I'm super excited for you. So before we dive in and really get to the nitty gritty, I do want my listeners to know a little bit more about you, how you got to this point in your career, just background up to this point. Could you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah. Well, what's crazy is that I didn't start in advertising. That's what's interesting about this is that, so long story long, I actually, when I was in college, I wanted to major in art. And I didn't necessarily know what that meant. And so I went and waited for the counselor, and she's like, do you need a job after this? And I was like, yep. She's like, well, why don't we change this to business marketing? And I said, okay, all right. So when I got out of school, while I was in school, I went to the advertising minority training day, and it was at Chiat. And this was when Apple was first coming out with the iPod and all that kind of stuff. And I remember them saying what the starting salary was. And I was like, no, I have a friend who answers phones at Capitol Records and makes more money than this. So I'm going to go and work at Capitol Records. And so I became an executive assistant at Capitol Records. And I learned how to work with the C-suite. Then I left there and went to TV and did the same thing. And then I ended up in executive recruitment, where I learned corporate marketing, and I worked there for about 6 years. And I really got to understand B2B marketing. And so that was probably the first 10 years of my career was corporate marketing and working in either as an executive assistant. And then when I moved to New York, I needed a new job. And someone was like, well, what industries are you interested in? And I said, I was always interested in advertising, but I never quite, the pay wasn't what I wanted when I first started out. And they were like, well, based on your experience, why don't you work in new business? Why don't you work in business growth? Because B2B marketing, you've worked in that space for quite some time. Why don't you just do that at an agency? And so I ended up working at McGarry Bowen in New York, and I worked in new business. And that was probably maybe 13 years ago. And so I just kind of used what I knew before and used it in advertising. So I didn't have a traditional sort of grow through advertising. I came kind of mid in my career to advertising, but the skills that I had learned from prior jobs translated really well, because in my role now, I'm sort of managing the C-suite to get things done for pitches and figuring out growth opportunities. Pretty much similar stuff that I was doing in corporate marketing, but just in an advertising space. So shout out to what was her name? Oh, the counselor who was like, honey, you need to go into marketing. You're trying to make some money. I was like, okay, I guess.
I love that. And I feel like you said so many great things, especially because number one, what's interesting, it's like people who work in advertising, they want to go client side or brand side, like we often say. So like, if you're not familiar, that just means like work in-house for a brand. So typically just like in the corporate comm space kind of, or corporate marketing space. So a lot of people like do the opposite thing. And so it's interesting to hear that you did like the kind of like unconventional thing, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
to come from the corporate space into advertising. But I think that's really cool because another big factor that I heard you speak about was really just like your skills being transferable. And
Mm-hmm.
I think oftentimes that like, especially I think in my age group right now, like coming out of college, having been in the workforce for like 5 to 10 years now,
Mm-hmm.
wanting to pivot in your career,
Yeah, and
you know?
that's interesting because at that time I was interested in creative spaces. So it was like I had more in this idea of like I have all these great marketing skills and I know how to work in these spaces, but I had craved creativity. And so I was at that age of like, okay, so what's next? And how can I now get into a space that somewhat interests me? And it's not that corporate marketing was like boring or anything like that. It's just, it's very structured. And one thing I had to learn personality wise is I had to not be as structured at times because now I'm in a much more laid back environment, which before I used to straighten my little hair and wear my little jackets and wear my nude nails and all of that. So it was like, wow, I can jazz this up a little bit. So you're absolutely right in terms of like those pivots. And you have to look at what life stage you're in at that pivot. At that time, I wasn't married, I didn't have kids or anything like that. So it was like, well, why not try a new industry? Because marketing is marketing wherever you go. It's just done differently at different places or different industries, kind of thing. But I felt confident enough to be like, okay, let me try it over here. All right. And I feel like that the same if I ever were to leave agency space. Okay, let me try it over here, kind of thing.
That's so good what you said. Marketing is marketing. I was in a meeting yesterday and I even said, I made a comment about like our product offerings for this particular brand. And we were talking about competitors and like, I'm like, listen, at the end of the day, the offerings are the offerings across the board. It's the same like funnel. It's the same, you know what I mean? Like investment, so to speak, that a consumer is making, but it's just about how you appeal to them, like how they can trust you, how you communicate that
That's
message
it.
of whether or not they should, you know, defer to one brand over another. And so I think that that's really cool that you said that because yesterday I was like a light bulb moment.
Yeah,
Like,
it's true.
don't reinvent the wheel, basically, is what I'm saying.
It is so true. And also just to add to that a little bit is that working in an agency space, you get to learn that in different industries quickly. When you work for a brand, you're only working for that particular brand. And so sometimes you may feel like I only know household products, so I can leave Clorox and I'll go to P&G kind of thing. So you think it's just that lateral and or that linear in that sense. In an agency, and especially in new business, we learn about from clothes to shoes to cars and that thinking is what clients are really paying for. The idea that you can make parallels between cars and clothes. Wait, how does that work? Or you can make parallels between lip gloss and cleaning products, huh? And so it just introduces like this new thinking, which really attracted me to kind of be a somewhat light subject matter expert on things that you don't have to go that deep, but you can kind of see how they all are connected.
No, for sure. That's really good. So let's fast forward a little bit. So you did you start in LA and then you went to New York?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Okay,
started
cool.
in LA,
And then New York and then back to LA because I know you're in LA
back to
now,
LA.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So now that you are back, you're obviously higher in the rankings, much higher. What would you say your day-to-day looks like, if at all the
So
same every day? You know what I mean?
I will say this. I am a creature of habit. I believe in what you do consistently becomes you. So the more that you do the same thing over and over again, it becomes a habit and it becomes who you are in a sense. And so I'm an early riser. I'm 5 a.m. kind of person. And I'm that person because I have so many personal things that I work on as well as work related. I have an old school day planner where I write out days, and I also have my Outlook calendar for work. But I would say my day looks like a wake up at 5, have me a little coffee, have my lemon water, feed my cat, but then also plan what I'm going to do on my personal level from like 6 to maybe 5:30 to 8, send emails on personal projects, go for what I'm now calling a prance because it's not really a walk or a jog, it's just a prance. I don't know what it is. It's just like a little movement with some music, I guess. um, and I come back and I get ready for my Deutsch day. And that's typically sort of planned out. I work a lot alone. I have a lot of autonomy in my role of just being able to make up different strategies to figure out how we can position Deutsch to new clients or possibly new clients. So a lot of my job is thinking about how to do that and then making up ways on how to do it. And so it's partly of what the idea is, but it's also like, how do you get leadership to actually do it in a sense? And so it's navigating, it's kind of like being this puppet master behind the scenes on like, I can see this connection and you have to believe in that connection that you only see because no one is managing that connection the way that you are. So my day is a lot of thinking about, well, what is it that we could do, but also not attached to it because it's like a bunch of first dates. If you've ever been on the dating scene, it's one of those things where it's like, well, that was cute, keep going. Well, that was cute, keep going, kind of thing. You can't just get attached to that one note or that one interaction and think that it's now going to pivot into an opportunity. These are big purchases that marketers make, and it's not going to be just one thing that we do that just makes them want to select Deutsch as an agency. So my day is a lot of thinking and a lot of just putting things in place that no one is thinking about, but it all makes sense when it all, sort of comes together. I'm sure you can relate to that being a producer and knowing like, I got to think this whole thing through for folks because no one's thinking about it until they're thinking about it kind of thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that I love that you mentioned like the full outlook of your day because number one, I think that's important and we'll definitely have to circle back because so many things just came to my mind. But when you said your Deutsch day, I think that that's like a spot on because there are so many moving parts. And that's why I kind of laughed in the beginning. It's like no day is really the same, but it's like the same goal or the same mission almost. And yes, you're right there. I love the autonomy of working in advertising sometimes but I also think that it takes a lot of like self-initiative or like
Yes.
self-starterness. I used to see that
Yes.
on job descriptions and be like, "Ooh, I don't know." Like coming out of
Yeah.
college, I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I don't know what it means to be a self-starter. Like, I don't know that I have that, but like you learn over time that it just takes a level of initiative, of you kicking things off, like you recognizing gaps and just acting on them. And to know that that's like really your day to day. I'm like, that takes a special person to be in that role. Seriously.
Thank you. It takes a lot. And it takes, like you said, that's that initiative. And you have to believe in it. You have to believe in what you're doing is making sense and you're putting these little pebbles down. I do want to say that I don't stay up late. I'm not a late person. I have a bedtime. I start winding down around 8:15, 9:15, I'm out. I don't necessarily believe in like the whole all-nighters and there's times where I stay up really late, just if it's like a holiday week and that's really me doing stuff that I like, a book or a show, but I'm not the kind of person that burns two candles at both ends. I value sleep and I don't play with my sleep and I don't play with my meals either. So
That's so important to say because if you know the culture of advertising, you know how it can be. I think just the
yeah,
culture of working in like the corporate space in general and wanting
yeah,
to like achieve greatness, you oftentimes feel pressured to be always on. And I think there's like a level of newness once you realize that boundaries are important that you
yeah.
experience within yourself, where you're like, I'm going to sleep tonight. And if you're going to wake up at 5 a.m., you likely need to be asleep by 9.
You
You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
And if you I have a post-it of the day for Deutsch Day, and I could probably put maybe no more than 5 things on that post-it. I'm lucky if I get 3 done. Or if I do all 5, or if I do 3 out of 5, I carry the 2 over to the next day. So it's very clear what I'm going to achieve for today. So then I don't feel like, why am I staying up trying to do all 5 today? I got 3 good ones done, or I got 2 good ones that took me a while, or even 1. I'll move those other 4 over to the next day, kind of thing. So it makes me feel like I'm making baby steps, and it's easy for me to tear up the note and start a new day over versus like, I can't do long notepads. I can't do it. This is all I'm going to do. If I'm not going to finish all of this, I'll move it to the next day.
Oh, this is so good. It's just making my spirit so happy.
I see your producer genes.
Like, I know there are. It's because I'm like, yes, like it took me a while to realize it. It made me want to ask you, like, why do you think, or when did you think? I don't know, but I'll ask, why do you think people struggle with this so much, whether it be in this space or in general? Because I'm someone who I have a whiteboard right here next to me. I'm always looking up at it, and I write my entire week out from like personal passion projects, things like the minor detail, like this, things from work, you know what I mean? Personal, like cleaning up and like paying bills, as much as I need to do in a week. And I literally go and check things off. But one thing that I noticed and that you just spoke on is like, you have that level of like appreciation for yourself when you see that you're getting things done, and you kind of take the pressure off of like, this all needs to be done today. But why do you think people struggle with that?
Well, I think a few reasons. And at one of the roots of it is not thinking what they're doing is enough, and not really seeing it as you could do one thing at a time. And so we have adopted this tasking sort of culture. And it's not to say you're not multitasking on those 4 things that you're working on, because you got 4 things in the hopper that you're working on. But it is to say that we never quite take a step back to say how much of this is enough for today. So for example, if you lay out, I'll take the minor details. You have a higher goal for this. You know how many people you want to interview, you know what your topics are, you know how you want to lay that out. So by you sending one day emails, trying to get people or talking with people or working your network, that's it for the day. I don't have to do that and promote it on social and do all the questions that day and, reach out to my staff. I don't have to do all that today. Today is all about outreach. It's all about outreach. And so then I feel comfortable with that. And then tomorrow is all about social. So I think at the root of it is we don't think it's enough, especially if you did your outreach in 3 hours. Now you feel like, okay, I got 8 more. I could do social now. No, you could go and make yourself something to eat. You could go for a walk. You could move on to another project. You could clean your place, whatever it is you want to do. But I spent 3 hours on outreach. I'm done with outreach for today, kind of thing. So I think we don't think it's enough. And I don't think when I worked in executive recruitment, this guy gave me this really good advice. He said, where do you want to go? And this is when I had just started there, and I was an executive assistant there. And I said, I want to be he said, where do you want to go long term? I said, I want to be a CMO one day. He said, okay, so what do you need to be a CMO one day? I said, you got to be a VP. He said, what do you need to be a VP? I said, you got to be a director. What do you need to be a director? You got to be a manager. What do you need to be a manager? You got to be a coordinator. And so he said, that's where you're at. Find out what you need to do to be a coordinator. Master that. And then once you master that, go to the next thing. And so I got obsessed with job descriptions and what do you do and how do you do it? And it didn't make sense at times where it's like, why do I keep asking these questions? But it made sense like, well, that's that kind of coordinator. That's that kind of manager. What do I want? Kind of thing. So it may have just been one. It's not, I think people struggle with it because they're not laddering into something that they know is bigger than what all this even matters, And so I want to do everything now. And now you can't, time doesn't work that way. Time works very incremental. So I think just having a higher vision of it and then thinking it's enough to do just that day really well, do it really well. Like your outreach is really well, like it's this, it's that, it's da, 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 da. You know what I mean? Not just some old half-ass stuff where it's like, well, whatever it may be, I'm making that up, but I hope you understand my point.
No, I do. And what I also heard you say is like, we can't play on a field or level higher than where we are. Like we can't be so far ahead in our thinking that it's affecting the day-to-day tasks that get us to the level above, like where we're the next step versus the next 5.
Yes. And being clear about what that, but then at the same time, as you do that, that's career. But then think about all the other things that's around you in terms of like how you want to keep your home, how you want to keep your body, how do you want to keep your meals. It's the same thing. So for the week, I'm going to have salmon, I'm going to have chicken, I'm going to guess what I need to do. What's the recipes for this week? I'm a big planner, as you can tell. And it's one of my strengths in terms of like, what is this going to look like? So I think it doesn't just stop with career. It can be, I want to be a mom. I want to buy a home. I want to go on vacation. I want my house to look like this. I want certain things. How do I get there? I want to buy art. What does that look like? Kind of thing. So I think just taking it on that level and piecing and chunking it down is why I think people fell at it, because they want it all right then and there.
So good. So good. Okay. Listen, I won't get too excited and derail us. So I'm going to circle back, but I want to talk a little bit about your work with Three's a Crowd and how that's like directly aligning with, just like the ad space, the workforce in general. Like we can go so many ways with that, but essentially through your organization, Three's a Crowd, there was a pledge, or you guys developed a pledge that was designed to disrupt systemic racism and create equity, specifically in the ad industry, by raising the percentage of Black representation in leadership roles by 13% by the year 2023. So it's no secret that obviously you're doing the work to prioritize creatives of color and talent in the advertising space. But I want to know, from your point of view, why do you believe there is a lack of representation to begin with?
I think this problem has never been successfully addressed. And I think the lack just continues like a snowball effect, because it never was, going back to the analogy of like, well, what is the end game for this? Is it just getting people in leadership? Is it promoting people? Like, what is it? I don't think that thinking ever existed years ago. I mean, what was it in the 60s and the 70s? It was about multicultural marketing being over here and general market over here. So it was like this clear distinction as to how we're going to go and show up in advertising. And now we're at a point where general market is multicultural marketing. And so now it's like, it never was addressed in a way of holistic. It was addressed in being separate. And so the thinking of it was never really thought of in that way. So when you start to think about leaders, when you start to think about talent, that all kind of it's all kind of interwoven in how the problem was never addressed in that sort of inclusive way to begin with. If business wise, it was addressed to be separate, in that way. And so now we're at a point where we know that they should be inclusive, they should be together. And so what's that hole that never was addressed in the 70s? What's that hole of leaders that, didn't grow up in advertising? In order for you to be like in the C-suite, when you have 25, 30 years experience, how many Black leaders do you know have 25, 30 years of advertising experience that could say, I'm now, ready to be a leader within this? Because that hole was never addressed. And so now we're at a point now where we're trying to fast track it, but we don't even know what that looks like if we fast track it. Are we now saying we're going to put people in positions that did not grow up in advertising? Are we saying that we're going to shorten the amount of time that you need to be, a leader here? You don't need the 25 plus years experience and 12,000, lion wins and all that kind of stuff. What are we saying? And that's where it gets tricky, because again, what's our end game with this? And so when we did the pledge of 13%, we were trying to give folks an actual goal and a deadline for them to actually get very strategic about, why is my leadership team not inclusive of Black talent? And what am I striving for? I want it to look like the country we live in, which is 13% Black people. And so that's the goal. So it should look like the country we live in. And I'm going to give you 3 years to do it. And we knew that folks weren't going to be able to do it in 3 years. But we know nothing in advertising gets done without a goal and a deadline and a brief. No one is moving until they have a brief, a goal, and a deadline. So let's speak our own language to each other and say, here's your goal, here's your brief, here's your deadline. And it got people to thinking like, oh, well, what's happening where I'm not getting Black talent? I have really young talent, but they leave in 5 years. Why is that? And so that's one of the biggest things that we saw within us sort of fostering that community of those agencies that are in. So net of answering the question, I don't think it was ever really addressed properly. from the beginning. I think it's always been separate, and now it's trying to bring it together. That hole was never really addressed from the beginning.
So good. So I did want to know tactically, because I love that you said nothing gets done in advertising without a deadline, a metric, a goal, whatever, and then a brief. So if we think about this tactically, what does reaching that goal look like? Are we talking to leadership in different agencies? You know, was there a deck involved that was circulated? Like, what did that look like to inform and educate, and then really actually start moving on this goal?
So it started as just take the pledge. And then I was like, that's not enough. So we put together 6 steps for them to follow and said the first one is acknowledging and getting your senior leadership involved, because the goal is not for you to just hire more Black people. The goal is for you to have them in leadership at 13%. And so you then have to think about, what does that look like? So we got very tactical with them to say, who do you consider leaders in your agency? VPs and above, managing directors, partners, I don't know what you call them, but that needs to be 13%. So think about that and make sure that everyone's clear about what that looks like. Then we got into the discussion of, well, that's like 90 people in my agency. Well, what is 13% of 90 people? That's what you need to improve by. So those are department heads, or those are special subject matter experts, or those are account leads, or whatever it is. That's what we're talking about. And so the first phase was to acknowledge who you were trying to get, what you were trying to accomplish, because we had probably over 200 people take the pledge, and they represented about 70 different agencies. That first phase, we were able to convert, I think, maybe 23 agencies. Like 49 of them fell off because they couldn't get that part done. That clear understanding, who is this for and why, what are we trying to do? The second phase was getting very serious about your numbers. So now that you know who it's for, now you need to really dig into, how many people do you already have in those roles? How many people don't you have it? What are you striving for? Are you at 0? Are you at 3? Are you at 7? What are you at? And sharing that internally and externally, and committing to whatever process you want to put into place to keep that up to date. Because at the end of the day, if you're trying to attract talent, Black talent, they need to see this. So it should be on your website. If you're trying to retain the Black talent, they need to see you're committed to this. So that was phase 2. Phase 3 is actually where we're at, where we start to dig into, well, what is the problem kind of thing. And we came back with 5 different topics. And the first one being creating that culture of belonging. What does that look like? How do you operationalize belonging, since it's a feeling? What is equity outside of pay? Like, I hear this word equity, but what does that mean when we say you make the same as everyone else? So how do you give more equity? Is it more visible projects? Is it a better promote? Like, what does that look like? The third one is, if you hire people outside of advertising, someone like myself that came into this, that didn't grow up in it, how would they be onboarded? What would you set them up to succeed in this space? The fourth one was pipelining. Some people were like, I find people, but I don't know how to foster the pipeline. And then the fifth one was retention, which been a big deal in the last 2 years of retaining. And what we found out was people are saying certain things as they get hired, but they're not doing what they're saying when people are actually hired. So how do we close that sort of what we were calling one of our agencies came up with the stop do gap? Like, what does that gap look like, kind of thing? So anyway, we're now a community of 23 different agencies that talk about those different topics to figure out where we could actually, how do we get to our 13%? Collectively, when we first started, we were at 3%. We moved to 6 over the last 2 years. We actually moved to 6 in 2021. 2023 was kind of just at the same point with the Great Resignation and all this other stuff that was happening. But it's moved, 3 percentages since we started. I don't know what next year is going to look like, which will be our final year. We may stay at 6, and then we have to kind of wrap it up to see, like, what does that look like? We may get to 8. I don't know. But at least people are now knowing they need to put a process and a system and a structure in place that's holistic. And they got to see that now that they're doing it for Black talent, it's not mutually exclusive. This should be for Latin talent. This should be for Asian talent, LGBTQ plus talent, everyone. You now have the thinking to be more inclusive. So it turned into more than just a pledge. It turned into a process and a community of sharing. So that's what I do at 6 a.m. is send all those notes to those people. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. Thank you for doing the work. Number one, that
Thank
is
you.
what is on my mind right now. And I think what you said is just so important. It's like, this is not mutually exclusive, but it's also, it shouldn't be seen as hard, or it shouldn't be seen as impossible, because I'm like you. I did not start in advertising. Like, I got my start in communications, but not necessarily in advertising. And I kind of like accidentally stumbled into advertising. And the one thing that I will attribute to that is COVID and working remotely. And so now we have this increased access to, pool of talent that we can no longer say we can't find these people, because
Right.
remote work has opened an entirely new door,
Right.
and has allowed so much more access to talent and talented people of color.
Exactly.
And I've just seen such a huge shift that, and retention is a whole nother thing. We don't have to get into that today, because once you get talent, you have to retain them. You have to see them. They have to trust you. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many different pillars, but I think that between COVID and everything that has happened since it, the talent is there for sure.
The talent is definitely there. It's now just a matter of fostering it. And it's also a matter of knowing this is going to be a long game. So if you find people who have 5 years experience, 10 years experience, and you're trying to groom them in or get them into senior leadership, what does that really look like? That's what I think is missing, or what has missed. Don't get these people in here and think that they now have to assimilate to what is already existing. How do you fix it where it's more inclusive for them to strive, as well as you to build a different culture? And that's has never been the case. So when you say, why can't I find, Black leaders who have 20 plus years of experience, I'll tell you why. Do you know what I mean? So the agency needs to shape and shift their culture to be inclusive to these leaders, if you're planning to groom them into, C-suite executives.
Definitely. And what's so funny about you saying culture, in advertising, we love to say that we have our ear to the ground, and we're listening to culture, and we are shaping culture through advertising. But I think what's the most funny is like the fact that that's not always true, and me being someone who is a person of color, a Black woman in advertising, you being someone who is also Black in advertising, I think we can see the level of like just layers and nuances that all of that comes with. And even when you think about the mistakes, right? Like the super popular Kendall Jenner and Pepsi commercial that everyone just loves, not really hates. And then recently with the passing of rapper Takeoff from the Migos, E! News, they posted his picture when they were announcing, I guess, what happened, and they posted a picture of like the wrong person. It was Offset and not Takeoff. You know what I mean? Like things like that, or examples like that, are truly what lead folks to believe that there are no Black people in marketing and advertising. And so I love your thoughts on like, obviously, in my opinion, I think that it's due to a lack of representation, but I also think that it's due to a lack of truly understanding culture, but also like not caring enough to learn. What do you think?
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I also think that we can't let the marketers off the hook either, because what happens is that there's not a lot of Black people in leadership in advertising. There's not a lot of Black people in leadership on the marketing side either. And so what happens is that a lot of these decisions and things are being made in a vacuum. And so you have these two leadership, groups making decisions on things that they aren't necessarily sure of. And they're very uncomfortable with asking certain questions of groups of people who are sure of it, because they're afraid of looking or being perceived as though like, I don't want to ask that person that because I'm going to look like a schmuck. I don't want to do it. And so now it's just like, well, let's just go with this kind of thing. And it becomes this sort of like ego in this way of like not really fully wanting to understand it in that way. And plus I got to move fast and I got to do this and that's enough and, that kind of thing. And so I think it's a devalue of culture in some cases, of like, it's not that important, but it is. It's enough for me to just say something more timely than it is for me to really understand what it is or why I'm saying this kind of thing. And you have these two groups who are not really have their pulse on it in that same way, because they haven't those same experience. It could have been very easily someone who knows the Migos who be like, that's not the right one. Oh, but because they're not even they're not even looking at it like, you know what I mean? It's like, is that 50 cents or is that Dr. Dre? Okay.
That is too funny, but no. And it's just so sad because even in that moment, like, you are announcing someone's passing, someone's death. Yeah. And it's, to us, people who are a part of that culture, like, do you not have the decency, you know? And it was, right. What was so crazy about it is, like, my friend actually saw it with her own eyes. She screenshotted it. Of course, they removed it and replaced it within like 5 minutes probably. But she had the proof. I was like, did you see this with your own eyes, or did a blog post this, right? And she's like, no, I literally saw this with my own eyes. And I was just like, it's crazy and it's disappointing. And I think it's also disappointing too to be Black in advertising when something like this happens, because I'm sure we all know collectively who the Migos are. I know y'all listen to that music, but it's just not great enough of an impact to you to feel like it's worth the discussion, even internally, even over Slack or Teams or whatever, right? Like, we send trending things that are happening on social every day, in culture every day. But when it doesn't make the cut, you're just like, but why not though? Yeah.
Well, I feel like that too about being an LA native. I feel like that about Nipsey. Like, Nipsey's been a staple, or was a staple in our community for years. And it wasn't until his passing that everyone wanted to know who he was or what he did. And, you know, and it's like what he did was, you can't even explain how much entrepreneurship and how much he wanted to give to South LA. And it's unfortunate because you're not a part of that community. And now it's like you want to brief into, you know, it never quite feels organic in that way. It's just like a talking point or a way in sort of thing. And so that's what I think also is a big deal too with retaining Black talent, is that it doesn't feel like it's real. And I've heard this in Three's a Crowd about, like, is it really real, or is it really just for us to say we kind of know a little bit? And so I think if we're going to say we're the beacons of culture and that we have our pulse on certain things, I think we're going to have to own what that really looks like. And because we work at the speed of light, you know, this in advertising, we work from cars to shoes. It has its advantages, but then it has its disadvantages when it's like full connectiveness to things.
Totally. So what would you say has been challenging, or some of your challenges navigating your career as a Black woman up to this point?
I think earlier I used to take it more personal. I mean, I've dealt with the microaggressions and the just blatant, just like, are you serious right now kind of comments. And I think in the beginning, and probably now, I've just now learned, or learning, ing, how to not take it as personal, because I'm in a different space than some other people that I work with all the time. But I think the biggest challenge is that, and I haven't, shout out to Deutsch, I haven't felt this at Deutsch, is actually being seen for what I really know. And almost at times feeling like I have to be smaller than I really am. I have a huge personality, and I have a lot to say about a lot of stuff. Sometimes I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but I just have a lot to say. And because I've had so many different bosses and experiences that did not want that part of me, I've learned how to suppress that part of me, and which is why my passion projects are so important to me. And so being at Deutsch, I'm being challenged a little bit more, like, we can see it. You need to bring that out. And I'm kind of like, ooh. Ooh, I'm sorry. So now it's like, how do I bring in that Tough Mudder Reonna that thrives in her spaces into these other spaces? And then sometimes I toy with the idea of like, well, that's too much. Y'all don't really know how deep I can go, you know, kind of thing. So I think the challenge is like the whole self, because I know how being a planner and a person that's just kind of compartmentalized, I know how to compartmentalize my Deutsch day or my Deutsch persona. And that's not to say like the whole, like the big code switching and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, it becomes like a thing, and you're just kind of like, okay, whatever, next sort of thing. So I think the biggest challenge is navigating what are those alter ego people that I am.
That's so good. And I think that that's something that I can truly resonate with. It's so like not involuntary, but you don't even realize it's happening until you're
Yes.
like, I am two different people. Like I might get off a call and then hop on FaceTime with a friend really quickly just to like catch up. I'm just two different people,
Two
but
different people.
it's like inevitable, right? Because you want to be able to feel confident in your surroundings that you can trust to like be your whole self around people.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think it's fair to say you can't always be that way. You know what I mean? And
No,
so it's like a protection or like protection mechanism or defense mechanism.
it is. And it's like, I saw this clip. I don't know who posted it on LinkedIn, but I was like, oh my God, I love Deion Sanders, as crazy as he may be. And he was telling this guy, like, stop code switching. Basically, that's what he was trying to tell him. And I was like, I applaud Deion for that. But I don't even think what I'm talking about is like the code, like, hi, Rihanna. I don't even think it's that. I think it's just like, I'm not feeling my feelings right now. I just need to get some stuff done, if that makes any sense.
For
And
sure. It's not
I don't have,
always your voice or dialect. It's like,
no,
yeah, for
you know
sure.
what I mean? It's not your voice,
Yeah,
it's not your dialect. It's just like, I'm not feeling that. I need to get this done. And if I were to really feel this, it would require I wouldn't get it done. So let me just get this done and balance that. And maybe the next go around I could feel it in that way. If I choose to, kind of thing. And so I don't know. I think in the opposite of my passion projects, I kind of feel it all. I just like, I want to talk it through, but then there's times where I know how to turn that off and give it to the appropriate person to help me with as well. I'm saying in a roundabout way. It's just a lot of me, and I don't know how to balance the all of me at times.
I think that's fair. I do. And I also feel like while there is no like you'll never have it truly figured out, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
there's no true blueprint to success or climbing the
right.
corporate ladder or how you show up, but I do believe that you've managed to make some pretty amazing strides. What would you say you could, attribute that success to? Or if you think about like this one thing has really kept me grounded over the years, you know what I mean? What does that look like for you?
I've always my mom said I was always a very independent child, and I used to think that it was like she's just lying, she doesn't want to love me. I'm just being stupid. But I've always been a very independent person, and I have a fearlessness about myself. As much as I joke about things, I take risks. I will take a risk and I will see what it is, kind of thing, which is probably why I work in new business, because it's a risk. It's just, hey, you don't like us, cool, whatever, kind of thing. I think that level of just try is what has been kept me as throughout my success, is just to try. I have no idea what it's going to be. And sometimes it drives people on my passion projects crazy. Like, well, we need to know exactly what we're doing. I don't know what we're doing. All I know is right now we're doing this, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Because I know what the bigger vision. Even with Three's a Crowd, we started it 4 years ago. I had no idea what it was going to be. We started off as like just having dinner and pizza and like what we call soul sessions, where we would just talk about like, girl, and we'd have these little moments of like celebratory or coming together. And then the more people came, I could see a bigger vision. I'm like, we have 7 people, we have 12 people, we have 35 people, we're up to 150 people. We could have an agency. We could do this. We could do that. We could start this. So my brain started to get like, now I can see there's a lot to us, kind of thing. And some people couldn't see it and some people could see it. So I think attributing to my success is being able to see opportunities when others can't and doing it, and not being afraid of what that looks like, because sometimes you don't need everybody to make it happen. They come as you build. So you got to have a lot of confidence in like, this is going to be something. And there were times where I would order dinner and 3 people show up, or there are times where I'd order dinner and 70 people would. So, but I had to believe in it. And I remember a friend of mine saying, why are you doing this? And I said, I just feel like I'm supposed to. but I didn't know what it was. And so then when things got really big, then it was like, I'm going to start talking to Black leaders and asking them, how do you navigate this? And I remember I talked to Glenn Singleton from Courageous Conversations, and he said, you need to put together like points of what you guys want to accomplish. And so saying all that to say that sometimes believing in things that others can't see, they'll come along, but you just got to believe in it yourself. You just got to try. You just got to try. And when it doesn't work, you move on, kind of thing. But at least you tried.
Yes, I love that so much. And I think mainly because I'm in a season of my life where I'm like, try, try without fear of failure, try without thinking about what could go wrong. Because I often think that people know what they should be doing. They have that level of conviction. They have that level of just like things pulling at them. But when you start to overthink the next steps about what may or may not go right, I think that's when you kind of talk yourself out of trying. And to hear you say like, I just know I'm supposed to be doing it. Like, that's powerful.
Yeah. And I still feel like that to this day, where it's like, I know I'm supposed to be doing this. Do we make money? No. Do we have a lot of friends and people who do a lot of things where I call balling on the budget? Yes. Is it something that I'm proud of and that I will continue to do if 4 people like it or 4,000 like it? I don't care. I just know that this is something that I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to continue to do it. So I think that has been the attributing factor to my success. I'm a trier and I'm a doer, and no job too big, no job too small for me. I will make a strategy or I'll order food. I don't care. I just know it has to be done. I'll sweep or I'll be on a panel. It doesn't matter. It's what has to be done, kind of
And I
thing.
think that's when you're committed to it too. Like you're willing to give it all you have because you just feel that connected. And not everything needs to make money either in the upfront. You know what I
No,
mean? Like things do need to build and kind of sort themselves out. Like you said, you don't know what it's supposed to be today, but tomorrow or in 5 years, it could be an agency that people are
it
trying to
could
come work
be.
for. It's a cute agency name, Three's a Crowd.
I know.
I think that's
Well,
fly.
let me tell you where the name came from. So we had this meeting when we first started, and a friend of mine said we should be called Three's a Crowd. And I was like, why? She said, because when 3 of us get together at work, it started looking like a crowd and people start looking like, why are those 3 people talking? What is going on? They're all Black. She was like, they think it's Nat Turner's rebellion or something. So she's like, something about, she said 2 is fine, but once 3 of us are like in the kitchen talking and we're kiki and it becomes a thing. And I was like, ooh, I like that.
I like that a lot. So what would you say, like, as Reonna, what inspires you? Like what you talk about passion projects a lot, which I love. I love hearing you being someone senior in leadership, works their 9 to 5, but also does things on the side. Like we have to talk about that offline. But what would you say inspires you to not even keep going, but just to feel, light, airy, like just passionate? I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, I love community. I love community. I love bringing people together. I love introducing people that don't know each other, but I know that they should meet. I love what I call making wine out of water. Like it's nothing there and it becomes something. I garden a lot, so I'm used to like, this is just a pile of dirt and it becomes like flowers or it becomes like tomatoes. So it inspires me to plant things and see it grow. And that can be a project, that could be people, that could be, a building or whatever it may be. So I get really inspired and jazzed up, just bringing all of that together and seeing people light up in their seat. Uh, I recently, side project, I started this storefront called Rooted here it's in Inglewood, and it's mixing fitness and gardening in one space. And the contractor that I used to renovate it, I've known him since he was a little boy, and now he's like 30 some odd years old, and he has his own contracting business, and he can make anything. And so when I brought him in and I said, help me build this, I saw him light up, and that lit me up, because he was like, you want me to help you build this? I was like, yeah. And so he's also going to school to USC architecture school, because he says, I'm used to getting the blueprints and making it, but now I want to make the blueprints. And I said, well, why don't you help us with our blueprint? And I saw him like, really? And I was like, yeah, you help too. And that lit me up to be like, here, let's do it together, kind of thing. So I get really inspired by turning on other people's light bulbs, and turns on my light bulb. And, I love that. And especially people who historically feel like they don't have a voice, or no one is listening, or no one is paying attention, or no one cares what they're good at. And you're like, no, you're good at that. Let's do it, kind of thing. Let's make some fire, kind of thing.
Man, that's so good. That's so good. I love it. I love it. I'm just so happy that we got to have this conversation. I want to say I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Because
Thank you.
it's just so exciting. Also, we have a lot of commonalities that I think it's just beautiful when you find like-minded people, and you're just so positive, and the energy that you bring, even over a freaking computer screen, is just so wonderful. A great start to the day.
Thank you.
But before we truly head out, I do want to know where the people can find you, where, we want to follow you. We want to come to your new studio, fitness studio / gardening studio. Like, tell us everything.
Well, first and foremost, you can go to threesacarl.black, and you can sign up if you'd like to come to any of our meetings and get familiar with who we are. The next thing, if you want to hear our voices and our topics that we talk about on Hex Code Black, it's on Apple Podcast, or it's on Spotify, and it's called Hex Code Black. And this is all of the Three's a Crowd community coming together and talking about different issues. And it's, like we were saying, it's at the intersection of race, culture, and creativity. So you can hear what we talk about in our meetings as well. And you could also join us at getrooted.life. That's coming up in the next month or two. So you can come back to that site once we have it up. But if you're in the Inglewood, Ladera, Baldwin Hills, South LA area, and you need a fitness community or a gardening community, you can find us there.
I love it. Well, Reonna, thank you so much for being on the show. I can't continue to just express my gladness and appreciation for you. This was absolutely amazing, and I'm wishing you well and just so much success. And I'm going to also be watching on the sidelines. And the next time I'm in LA, I will definitely be at Rooted. I just need to figure out when that's going to be, because now I got to be there. But thank you. Thank you. If you're tuning in and listening to the show, thank you so much. This was just so much fun. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.